This is the Final Word Daily. It's back because Test cricket is back. India, England, playing at Trent Bridge, the first test at Nottingham, the first day, and as we do on this show, Adam Collins has to tell you what happened today in the space of 30 seconds.
Hello, Geoff. Yes, the Daily is back, but England's batting continues to be as it always was, really. They elected to bat first at Trent Bridge upon winning a toss and all out for 183. 2 wickets in the first session, bookending that stanza, likewise in the second. Then they lost 6 for 22 either side of tee, all out 183. India did really nicely on the way to stumps as conditions got better. 21 without loss at the close of play with Rahul and Rohit doing it fairly straightforwardly. Is that even a word? Doesn't matter. That's the end of my 30 seconds.
I thought that the last hour of the day was the most important in a lot of ways because, you get resold for 180 batting first. That can be fine if you can knock the other guys over for 150. And it felt like that last hour could be really difficult. That could be that the ball was moving around all day. It's getting late in the day. You think the light's starting to go. And then in the end, the sun came out. And it actually, as you said, it did seem a little bit easier to bat, even though there was some good bowling. There weren't a lot of alarms. There was one, Rohit Sharma in the first or second over flashed one through the cordon.
Yep.
And there was an LBW that went upstairs that was sort of high and going down legs. There wasn't a lot else other than that for England's bowlers.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it as well. I thought under what looked to be leaden skies, it certainly was as India were bowling England out, that Anderson and Broad on their favourite ground could be a handful. I mean, I think Anderson's taken 64 test wickets there at like 17 and Broad maybe it's like 42 at 19 or something like that. It's ridiculous numbers they've both posted over a long career and a big sample size. But yeah, for whatever reason, the ball didn't hoop around quite the same way as it did when India were bowling. And how often do you see it when you're resold, as you say, for 180 odd that you don't get quite the same assistance out of a surface? And look, India bowled immaculately. 4 for Bumrah, 3 for Shami, 2 for Thakur and 1 for Siraj. So the 4 seamers they picked all delivered. Big call leaving out Ravichandran Ashwin in favour of Jadeja, who only bowled 3 overs, and also leaving out Ishant Sharma, who takes his wickets at 19 over the last couple of years. But I suppose they leveraged off the idea that Ishant bowls so well to left-handers, and England only have one of those, Rory Burns, and he was out in the first over of the Test match to Jasprit Bumrah. So they're planning. I mean, it's hard to think of a way that could have worked out better for India in terms of the selection, the way they executed that plan. Wickets at the perfect time, starting a session, so putting England on the back foot, then at the end of the session, so the good work was undone. Likewise, the start of the second session, Dom Sibley falling into the leg side trap essentially, and then at the end of the session, just when Bairstow and Root were building something, they put on 72. Bairstow's out leg before wicket for 29. Shami gets another wicket in that same over. Dan Lawrence strangled down the leg side, and then they're on a roll, and then the whole thing falls over. If not for some good hitting from Sam Curran towards the end, they could have been out for 160.
Yeah, and the Bairstow one, a sort of risk and reward thing. He's got that off stump setup that he uses, and it was the ball coming back into him that did him in the end. So there is that risk that you take when you set up that far across, and it was the one that came back in. It was pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, a lot of the day was pretty straightforward. You've got to be very good to execute it, but as far as the strategy goes, there was nothing hugely complicated. Jasprit Bumrah was doing it with the in-swinging Yorkers to the tail. He was doing it, pitching the ball just back of a length and moving it off the seam earlier. The way that he worked over Joss Buttler was
amazing,
just beautiful. Like one of the best passages of cricket I've seen in such a long time. What was it, 18 balls that Buttler batted through, couldn't score, couldn't get off the mark, and just ends up pushing at one it's a bit too short to play, and it's moving away just enough, and it kisses the outside edge, and it does all the things that you want from your fast bowler in those conditions. When he's not pitching it up looking for it to swing that particular time, he's just getting it to deck away enough. Just a gorgeous setup.
Yeah, I described it on commentary as the stuff you dream of as a fast bowler. So it was the full stuff, testing Buttler out on the stumps, back of a length, making him play when perhaps he wouldn't want to. Joss Buttler hasn't played a first-class game since the Chennai Test match in the first week of February. In those conditions, the old ball moving around, but not reverse. This was conventional swing with the more mature Dukes just in that final session. I mean, it was glorious bowling. I think sometimes we forget almost that Jasprit Bumrah, maybe not having had a massive World Test Championship final and not having much of a say in the Test series in Australia, we might have just forgotten a wee bit that Bumrah is like one of the best bowlers in his generation, full stop. and he showed that today at the start and throughout with the wicket of Butler. It was a crucial turning point in the middle of that collapse. And in the supporting cast, I love the fact that Mohammad Shami had a big influence on today, as I mentioned, either side of tee. He was so good before lunch, but just when he pitched it up a little bit more, often a criticism of Shami, he looked unplayable at different times. And then Shardul Thakur, our favourite, final word favourite Shardul Thakur, 2 wickets in and over, had his say, played a role, shaped the ball beautifully. I mean, he looks a little bit underwhelming. He's not that tall, he's not that svelte, I suppose, but he continues to move the ball away from the right-hander with natural hoop. He bowls he bowls a very good length, which is part of what contributed to Joe Root stumbling over, and he was the one player to make a big contribution, wasn't he? Root was 64. It was the length that Thakur bowled to him that brought his downfall, along with a little bit of outswing. Then you throw Siraj in there, who got the wicket of Zach Crawley just before lunch when Crawley was going through the gears. So all 4 Indian seamers did what they needed to do and stepped up at the perfect time through the course of the day. Virat Kohli will be chuffed.
I did wonder about that. It was just about my dream India 11. Rohit Sharma and King legend Rahul at the top. Shardul Thakur comes into the side.
Yes.
Jadeja's in the side, like the kind of players that they leave out. Shardul, I think, is the player who will contribute in any way. Like he might win you one Test match with the bat in a 5-test series. He'll make contributions with the ball. I think he's a great inclusion, and he's not always the most obvious inclusion, but he should have been there. Everyone just about bar Ashwin. I think Ashwin could come in. Bumrah has to play, but in my dream 11, Ashwin probably comes in for one of the other 2 quicks. But it was just about there. And then England. I mean, England talk every time they lose a match about learning things, and we have to learn from the experience. This doesn't seem like a cricket culture, even beyond a team that learns things as far as tests go. They've got the same top 3 that was misfiring against England. They've got the same 4-seamers attack with no spinner in the side. I don't know what Chris Silverwood has against spinners, but I suppose if you get bowled out for 150 on the first day, you probably don't need a spinner because you'll lose in 3 days. But you need to have the option in the side, surely, when it has been such a big shortcoming in the losses that you've had, big losses, in the outing against New Zealand, the way they got smashed in India, where they even picked 4-seamers in India, for Christ's sake. Something is amiss with the decision making. Nothing changes, and so it's not going to get better for them.
They just looked unbalanced, didn't they? I don't think Sam Curran's ever really played as one of the 4 frontline bowlers, maybe once in the Caribbean a couple of years ago, but I mean, Sam Curran is at his best when he's like the 5th bowler. And that's not to denigrate his bowling, by the way. It's just a team balance thing. And look, when Stokes was ruled out, or when Stokes ruled himself out, rather, on Friday, I think we thought that Curran might play the balancing mechanism. And instead, because their batting isn't strong enough, they go with 6 specialist bats, Joss Buttler at 7, 4 quicks. And in a way, the reason why Leach isn't playing is because the top 6 isn't dependable enough, with the exception of Joe Root. So, yeah, that's a structural flaw. It's a design feature of a team that hasn't got its act together in the top 6, which means they have to play funny buggers between 7 and 11. And often a solid, competent cricket team doesn't need to go down that path. So, look, Curran's a great contributor. He was with the bat today. He already looks a likely type with the ball in the couple of overs he bowled before the close of play this evening. So, no concern with Curran being in the team, but it's more that, his presence highlights, at number 8, highlights that they don't have room for a spinner. And look, what happened to Dan Lawrence today, that happens, right? In at number 6, I'm glad that he got picked. I think his 4th ball, he tickled down the leg side. That can happen to anybody. It's a frustrating dismissal. But the fact that he was walking out there after Bairstow got out just before tea, that should have been Johnny Bairstow restarting after tea. And Bairstow, I'm reluctant to get stuck into him because obviously when he and Root were out there, it was the only time that England looked vaguely in control today. But him falling, I mean, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it shouldn't really be. At 138 for 4, it shouldn't be, put the cue in the rack.
Game over.
That's not a scoreline that things should capitulate from. But with England, It kind of does. That is the friction point. So, yeah, they're well short of a gallop as well, which doesn't help. And I know that there's going to be some reductive analysis from those that say, well, the 100 is the reason why this happened. Well, obviously, people who write that, or nobody will write it, because nobody in the press box would draw such a ridiculous conclusion. But people will say it offhandedly. If not for the 100, then no, that's not what's going on here. But from a scheduling perspective, I doubt they'll ever go into a series again like this with so many of their first 11 who have been picked here having so little first-class cricket under their belt in this season we're currently in. Sam Curran hasn't played since January, Butler since February. There's a number of other examples like that. So, yeah, it's about scheduling, not about the 100 ruining batting techniques or any of the rest of the gibber that you read from place to place.
It is pretty telling that, aside from Burns and Sibley, none of the top 7, top 8 had faced a red ball competitive delivery since the last Test match, in which they got thrashed by New Zealand. So, you know, you can draw from that the conclusions that you will. The breather point, we've got to think about who's the player of the day, what's in the Hall of Fame in just a second.
Woodstock Cricket, home of the finest handmade cricket bats and soft goods. Visit either our showroom or workshop and experience the magic for yourselves. For bookings, contact info@woodstockcricket.co.uk.
It's the Final Word Daily. Geoff Lemon, Adam Collins. I reckon my player of the day, fondness notwithstanding, is Shardul Thakur. I thought his intervention, like Joe Root was the one thing that was going for England, and the enthusiasm with which he launched himself into that spell and the way he set up Joe Root was outstanding. And that was the thing, that was the difference between England maybe recovered at 240, 250 and England get shot out for under 200.
Yeah, no disagreement from me when we're talking up Shardul. On the other hand, I think that Bumrah and Shami can almost split it. It's like the high jump final a couple of days ago. I think that they were just so good, the both of them. And I think Siraj, on a different day, Siraj probably runs amok as well. He did very little wrong as the first change option. So, yeah, collectively, India's bowlers, I mean, we said it 3 years ago, didn't we? It's the best fast bowling group India have ever produced, and they seem to get better series after series. It's a joy to watch.
And they seem to be able to leave out 3 or 4 really good fast bowlers every time they pick an 11. Even when they're picking 4, they're still leaving out, you know, Bhuvneshwar Kumar wasn't there, Ishant Sharma wasn't there. So, yeah, the variety they've got at their disposal. As for the Hall of Fame, I particularly enjoyed the moment. This is the one thing that might not be completely great about the retrospective no-ball laws, that the last ball of the over, Sam Curran's batting with James Anderson, is wanting to farm the strike. He gets a really nice in-swinging Yorker, I think, from Bumrah, and manages to squeeze it out for a single. Very clever, very well done. Now, that ball was a no ball. In the old days, Curran would have seen the arm up, or even if he hadn't seen it before he hit the ball, he would have seen the umpire's arm raised as he came through, or more accurately, probably wouldn't have seen it because the umpire wouldn't have called it. But had the umpire called it, he would have known not to take the single because he had to face the next ball. As it was, he ran the single, was quite pleased with himself, and then about 45 seconds later, they said, oh, sorry, that was a no ball, one more to come, and Anderson has to face that last ball of the over. It would have been very funny had he got out to that delivery, but he didn't.
Yeah, I'm willing to pay that. The unintended consequences of the final words no ball change, that's fine with me. I'd throw up for consideration the review process for India immediately before lunch. So there's the howler, the bad review that they shouldn't have gone with. And then Kohli has the presence of mind to go up a second time, informed by Rishabh Pant, by the way, and they don't go up the third time also because of Rishabh Pant's advice. Maybe, just maybe, Virat Kohli is paying a bit more attention to his colleagues with him in the cordon when it comes to using DRS, and that can only be a good thing.
Imagine, though, the situation that you're in if Rishabh Pant is the voice of restraint and reason. If Rishabh Pant is the designated driver of the slips cordon when it comes to DRS. Like, that is an interesting state of affairs. I've got one more, which was this kid he was maybe 15 or so. He was coming up on the coverage. He was wearing this sort of fancy dress costume that was like a giant inflatable alien that with big inflatable legs out the front, so it looked like it was carrying him around, you know, good laughs, very, very funny. But the bit that I particularly liked was he decided to go back to his seat, and the camera stayed on him for about 40 seconds while he's working his way along a row of people squeezing in front of them with this giant costume attached to it. And then he sits down in the seat comfortably to watch the rest of the cricket. Now, the bloke behind him, this costume's about 2 metres tall. and it's just sticking up right in the face of the guy behind him who can't see a thing. And this kid's happily oblivious to it. The whole thing's on the television. It was a beautiful vignette.
Lovely stuff. There was also a kid carrying 4 ice creams at one stage, like he was carrying 4 beers, which I thought was quite a good effort. So all the fun of the fair on the first day of Test cricket with full crowds since COVID-19. Nowhere around the world, the best I can tell, have had full crowds for a Test match since last March. So that's something to celebrate as well. Geoff, before we sign off, if you haven't listened to our interview with Felix White yet on the weekly show, do that because it's really nice. We did that a couple of days ago, and I think if you like what we're doing here, if by chance you're new to the Final Word by virtue of the fact that we're making these dailies, go back in the feed and listen to our weekly show with Maccabee, tailender, enthusiast, author Felix White. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Yep, this is the Final Word Daily. We'll be doing these each day of the Test series between England and India. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Bye.